Andrew, I don't know if you know this, but I don't think you're in the right place. Question.
Hey, I got the
What are
gear.
you doing here?
I even got the gear for it.
I know. Andrew has infiltrated. He has crossed through the forbidden door, or what other people are using for other promotions, the prohibiting portal.
I just got called up for Ring of Honor, just for this week.
This week, Andrew is having to try out here on the main. I don't even want to say main roster because Dynamite, Collision, Rampage, and ROH are all kind of like melded together. There's no true main roster. But hi, all you BC WrestlePod nerds out there, and welcome to another rendition of the Collision Collective Review, your weekly AEW Collision. I am one of your hosts, Mikey, also known as El Jefe around the BC WrestlePod parts. I am the man with half of a plan and the face that somewhat runs the place. I don't know. I kind of just let everyone do what they want. And tagging in for Adolfo this week, and I appreciate him more than he will ever truly know. He is my tag team partner, my other trio's compadre when it comes to TNA, as well as the forthcoming CMLL, which is happening in a couple of weeks, which should be interesting. We got to talk more about that a little bit later. But Andrew is here. Thank you so much for guesting here. You really helped me out with the jam.
Yeah, sure. It's always fun to watch some of the other stuff I don't regularly watch, so I don't mind.
Much appreciated. Adolfo could not be here this week because he's out living his best life performing with the Lords of Adventure over in Ren fairs all over his state. Lucky. I wish we could have stayed longer so we could have seen that, but you know what? That's neither here nor there. But Adolfo will be back this week, and minor spoiler alert, you might be seeing him popping into more shows this week because we got a lot going on this week, and it's all hands on deck. But I'm super excited for this week. But let's just get into it. Me and Andrew are here to cover the Saturday, June 8th edition of AEW Collision. And there was lots of things that I liked, but also lots of things I had questions on. And we are in the middle of Forbidden Door season. Some more stuff got confirmed, and the road to Forbidden Door is now officially happening, especially since New Japan's Dominion show is now in the book, so now we know where we're going with certain other things. But let's talk about the most divisive thing that I have seen in the AEW fandom this week with our opening match, because we had a tag team match that was set for a 20-minute time limit, and this saw parts of Blackpool Combat Club being represented by Claudio Castagnoli and your ROH Pure Champion Wheeler Yuta. I don't know if it was because Bobby is the one who is the announcer on Collision, but thank you for announcing Wheeler as your ROH Pure Champion, because I love Justin on Dynamite, but he did not do that with Mark Briscoe. So I don't know if that was a personal choice or whatnot, but Claudio and Wheeler are taking on the boys of FTR. I don't know about you, Andrew. This is tag team wrestling. I say this all the time, tag team wrestling with our tag team expert, aficionado, if you will, Andrew. I've seen both of these teams do better in other circumstances, but for me personally, it's safe to say that I definitely will put this match in my top 25 of this year in some capacity, because I thought this was a solid match. I have seen them do better, but it is nice that Wheeler continues to get more acclimated now that he's back from his concussion protocol injury. So I can't knock him for that. And, the most divisive thing that seems to have fans split is the fact that this went to the actual time limit. But before we talk about all the stuff that happened afterwards, Andrew, what did you think of BCC and FTR going at it to open up Collision this week?
I mean, watching this, every time I see FTR wrestle, I realize they're the epitome of tag team wrestling. They're phenomenal. They are what you think of when you think of tag team wrestling, especially that classic American style tag team. But it's kind of a bummer that they're kind of perpetually left out or underutilized. There were a lot of things watching Collision this week that made me realize that they're just victims of the same thing that's kind of afflicting a lot of people because most of the time that I see FTR now, anytime they're anywhere near anything big, it's them feuding with the Young Bucks. That's what I feel like I've only seen. But this match was actually really good. It started off a little slow, but I felt that it got better and better and better as we got closer and closer to the end. And I thought it was a great showing from both tag teams. Like, obviously, FTR did what FTR does, but Claudio and Wheeler look good as a tag team. I know they were tagging a bunch before Wheeler went out. So I thought this match itself was really good. It was entertaining. It seemed to be heavily Dax and Claudio in the match. And I am happy to see Wheeler Yuta back doing more. But now that he's back and we've seen him in 2 matches in AEW, it's time to start seeing him in Ring of Honor, or time to like have somebody else hold that title, because it's been so long since we've actually seen anything done with that title or that division. And something I noticed going throughout this night is AEW has a really big problem of building divisions that will help tell stories and better utilize their talent. And I think that's really where people kind of get lost in the shuffles, because there's no structure.
No, and I have to agree with you on that one, Andrew. I mean, Andrew's one of the few other people here on BC WrestlePod that checks out all the other stuff. So thankful to him, which is a lot of wrestling content. So apology for that, Andrew. But I have to agree with you in the sense that, and this has been not just my biggest complaint, but the other crew's complaint that includes Professor, JVL, and Adolfo, where wrestling, we know that AEW has the capacity to put on really good matches. But my biggest complaint as a writer, I want to see feuds and stories going into it, because the key terminology I like to use in this analogy is that we are watching wrestling entertainment. The wrestling portion for AEW is always usually pretty good, 9 out of 10 times. But the entertainment factor needs to be there when it comes to the soap opera-ness of the storylines and the feuds and things like that. And AEW's biggest problems is that they do what I like to call bingo ball booking, in the sense that they pick somebody to feud with leading into a pay-per-view, and then that feud is one and done, and then we move on for the next challenger. They don't do multiple matches with the same folks leading into pay-per-views and TV shows, which I think right now is what's hurting AEW. But we end up reaching the time limit draw for this one. So FTR and Blackpool Club reached the 20-minute draw. Both teams are not satisfied with it. Dex gets on the mic and wants 5 more minutes. But then who should come out but the EVP's lackey, Brandon Cutler, which I'm kind of sad that he is now in this role. I wanted him and Colt Cabana to continue to be a team, but that's neither here nor there. But he basically says, it's like, no, y'all ain't getting any more time. That was it, 20 minutes. And then FTR and BCC proceed to beat up Brandon Cutler. They stuff the match contract in his mouth. Dax announces that I'm sorry, I can't read. I was just like, and basically we leave this open because Claudio tells FTR that we're not done with this. You just tell us anytime, anywhere, we're going to finish this. And then that's how this match and segment end.
I don't actually mind it, because it had me noticing later on that when they announced other matches, they gave them time limits. And so rarely do we ever see that time limit matter, that it bothers me more when I look at when promotions announce time limits for matches and then it never matters. When you say, oh, we've got 20-minute time limit for this match, and the match goes 5 to 8 minutes, then it's like, why did we have to give it a time limit if a match is never going to go that long? So I like that happened if we're going to have that stipulation. If you're not going to ever have people go the time limit or even get close to where we have to worry about it, then stop putting time limits on there. So it doesn't bother me as much, because it's world building storytelling, but also I didn't want to see FTR lose to BCC, and it was good for both teams to not have a loss and instead look strong in a draw. And it does leave the door open for future matches. I don't know that we're going to get anything anytime soon from them, but it's at least something to where it's like, okay, they both have a draw against each other. So yeah, it doesn't bother me, because it makes sense in the world that we're saying they exist in.
Agreed. So after this whole entire match and after their match segment, we cut backstage where we get an interview with Kyle O'Reilly, which basically sets up for what's going to end up being our main event in the night. But before Kyle can get anything else out, he is interrupted by Roderick Strong and the Undisputed and the rest, well, at least Matt Taven and Mike Bennett of the Undisputed Kingdom. Basically, Roddy tells Kyle that should he need any advice because he's beaten Orange Cassidy twice, that he can come to him. What Kyle says is that, like I told you when I got here, I'm just doing my own thing. We're good to go. And then weirdly, Roddy ends this segment with, remember what I told you when you came back? I was like, but you didn't tell him anything? So I'm like, I don't know what we're alluding to, but that's how that ends. And we'll talk about how this comes to fruition later in the main event, because I also have thoughts about what's coming down the pipeline for that. So next we get our first Squatch match of the evening. While I do love Miss Chris Statlander with all my heart and being, it disheartened me that she took on Robin Renegade. You know, what I would say at this point, Robin and the Renegade Twins in general, I feel like are staples of ROH. They have been consistently on our television. It's been a couple weeks since we've seen either one of them on ROH TV. But I don't want to say that Robin was bad. But I also want to say that I have seen her do better, because this was just one-sided. And I get why, because Chris is powerhouse. Chris is crazy. But like, this was really one-sided, and it really disheartened me a little bit. I was like, poor Robin. But in a weird way, I was like, this did nothing for Chris either, just to get her a win. It wasn't until Stokely got onto the mic that explained what is happening next for Chris. But as far as the match itself, this was a Squatch match. I was disheartened for both women. This was sad for me.
Yeah, Robin could have been used as an actual challenge to Chris. Like, Robin's, pretty decently sized wrestler too. We've seen her, especially in Ring of Honor, look really strong, and even when she's come up against losses against some of the top talent there, she started to look stronger and stronger. This could have been a chance to make Chris look strong by facing someone who pushed her even a little bit, because really this is the kind of match that she should have been wrestling local talent, not someone like Robin Renegade. This was the prime example of just taking a dump on Ring of Honor talent to get a little bit of a push for AEW people. They could legit push Chris Statlander to championship level. I don't know that they will or well. I feel like they're going to do the same thing that they've done with other women in AEW, is push her enough to have her be a challenger, because they're going to need to line those up, because you're running out of them, so you need to build up the next person. But I don't know that they're going to invest enough to make her the legit threat that she needs to be in order to either convince us that she could win that title, or even more so, actually win that title and be seen as a champion. She's got the skills, the talent, the look, the style, the power to do all of that. It's just a matter of if they'll do it right. But yeah, this was such a poor use of Robin Renegade. I know Charlotte has been out with, I believe she's been dealing with concussion or something like that. It would be, obviously just for her health-wise, like, hopefully she recovers soon, but it would be great to see them back together again. And yeah, it'd be great to see, and I say this all the time on Ring of Honor reviews, is to see Ring of Honor talent actually treated with like respect, and just the talent overall be treated better.
I agree with you. I want to see our ROH talent, who does get utilized in AEW, be treated with more respect and be better. Like I mentioned before, Stokely cuts a promo after the match, which is to announce that Chris will be entering the Women's Owen Hart tournament. And so remember, this year's Owen Hart tournament for the men and women do have stakes this year, where the winner of the tournament will get a championship main event to match at All In at Wembley. And so this is not the first time I'm going to say this phrase, but I am intrigued about the tournament, because at least on the women's side, we do have some really fun contenders, and I'm actually interested in the men's side too, which we'll talk about a little bit. But Chris is entering the tournament, which prompts us to cut backstage, where Willow Nightingale has just arrived at the arena. She is asked about the match, and she's asked about the announcement that Chris is entering the tournament. Willow is still battling the fact that Chris turned on her and they were friends, so it still hurts. But She congratulates Chris, and she's here to keep an eye on the competition. We will talk about Miss Willow later in the evening, but Willow is also entering herself into the tournament, especially as the current Women's Owen Hart tournament winner, as she and Ricky Starks won the tournament last year. You better not tease me with these two going at it, and then it doesn't happen in the tournament. I'm already excited for Willow versus Chris's match in this tournament. Like, that match is going to ball. I'm so excited, but I can't hate Willow. I love her so much.
And, this is another great example. Like, Willow could be a phenomenal contender to go up and challenge Toni Storm if she's the one that's a champion at the time. I'd love to believe that they might actually build up Willow enough to have her win that title too. I feel like she is on that trajectory. They just have to continue to use her smart. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, but I gotta say, Willow's gotta look at, from a storyline perspective, she's gotta look at her choices because she's not had luck with her friends. Sky Blue turned on her not too long ago when she kind of went to the dark side, and now Chris Statlander, and it's like, she just can't keep friends. They just keep turning on her, which is a bummer.
Yeah, but she has something in common now with a certain other person whose friends keep turning on him, which we'll talk about later. But after Willow Nightingale's interview, we get into not necessarily a squash match, but definitely a more slower paced match. We get Dustin Rhodes taking on Johnny TV. Again, Taya Valkyrie is out here. This one wasn't as funny as last week's Collision when Taya was out there for Johnny versus Claudio, which in a weird way, Claudio does comedy a little bit better than Dustin. And obviously, because there's a disparity of Johnny's still pretty good in the ring, Dustin's about to retire within the next year or so. So this is definitely a more slower paced match, but I don't know, maybe it's the sense of nostalgia. Like, I can't hate on Dustin Rhodes. But as far as the match goes, it was a lot more slower pace. Dustin does pick up the victory here. I want better things for Johnny. At least Johnny is always good. He looks good against the opponents he had. Like, he looked really good against Claudio last week. He looked good against Dustin here. But yeah, Johnny TV continues to be on a losing streak, and Dustin picks up the win. So before we talk about the promo after the match, Andrew, how do we feel about Johnny versus Dustin?
I mean, I think these two might be two of the best to never really hit that like world championship level. I think there's about a 10 or 11 year age difference between the two of them, but neither one of them are super young, and they've had really long careers. So, like, the fact that they've never really been at that top, especially in the bigger promotions, their skills in the ring, their storytelling, their safety for themselves and for their opponents is top notch. So I definitely have to respect both of them for that. Watching this, I want to see a match between Dustin, Billy Gunn, R-Truth, and PCO, because you're all talking about like 50 plus year olds who are still going and still look good for considering how long of a career and how old they are. But this match was good. It was nothing spectacular, and really it just felt like it was hyping up Dustin for the promo that happened afterwards. I agree. I would love to see Johnny TV actually like have something, and I feel like if Ring of Honor was more dedicated to Ring of Honor, he's a great person to have in a variety of places that you could put him, but because it's so patchwork there, that between not consistency with him and then him coming over to AEW where he's just going to be the person to come in and take the loss, he's just kind of getting stuck in that spot. So obviously he's making the best that he can of it. Taya and Johnny are always entertaining to watch. I do have to say I noticed something that bothered me, and it was a consistency throughout the evening. Tony Schiavone is really bad at calling moves. So he said that Dustin finished the match with another crossroads, when in actuality it was a final reckoning that he hit, not a crossroads. He hit a crossroads earlier. And there were some other times that he miscalled matches. Like at one point during the Toni Storm match, Toni Storm hit a sky high and he called it a sit out power bomb. But it was just really bad. He also called Lady Frost Lady Storm. But yeah, it was just, there were some bad match move calls that he did in there, and that just always kind of bothers me because I'm like, you all are commentators, and some of you have been commentating for like almost as long as I've been alive, which is not a short amount of time. You should know your move sets. If I know them, you should definitely know them. So, yeah, that was kind of something that bothered me about that match.
Now, Andrew, you bring up the point that we always do too, because what kills us on Dynamite, and funny enough, not as much as Rampage, because Daddy Magic actually does a really good job at commentary, but Dynamite is always a struggle to get through with commentary, because between Toni, Excalibur, and Taz, like, they don't make it easy for us during matches. And Tony's usually on his A game for the most part, but yeah, just this night in particular, Toni was tired. I was just like, Toni, what is happening? Like, if this was the case, I was just like, because Collision is usually Toni and Nigel, but sometimes they have Ian. I was like, Toni, you should have just tagged in Ian, like Riccaboni, to be here for the evening and just let him run commentary, because Nigel and Ian would have been fantastic, because they already have a working relationship, because Nigel did ROH commentary before, the pandemic happened. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about the Ring of Honor commentary team. Like, they could have put Ian and Caprice on Collision permanently. I mean, don't take them off of Ring of Honor, but give them that gig too. They're a great commentary team to add to anything. So
honestly, they make anything. And even though sometimes they lie to us, but I rather listen to them lie to us than half the things that get said. But after the match, Dustin Rhodes cuts this promo against Jack Perry. Jack has been complaining about, working for everything, but he basically calls out the disparity between the two without mentioning the name. Dustin says that you haven't had to work for Ish because he's a Perry. He is the son of Luke Perry, insinuating that the kid was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And then Dustin pulls from his own personal, your job hasn't been replaced by the computer, and they didn't give you a watch for all your years of service, which I hate when companies do that. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother episode of a podcast, because I'm like, ooh, that's rude and rough. But essentially, this promo is to set up that we're getting a qualifying match for the TNT Championship ladder match at Forbidden Door on next week. I believe it's on Dynamite. Jack Perry versus Dustin Rhodes, where the winner goes on to be in the ladder match. We are definitely building up to the final world tour for Dustin Rhodes. He has said that by the end of this year, he is going to be retiring. So I believe that I have yet to see him. Again, AEW is 5 years old, so it probably could have happened. But I believe Dustin versus Jack Perry is going to be a first-time match, I believe. Or at least one that I've seen. I'm kind of late to the game with AEW. I'm excited for it. I thought the promo was a good old Dustin promo, and I'm just like, yep, your shades of your dad is definitely in there, which makes me happy, but also very sad too at the same time. I'm like, I'm looking forward to the match, but I know the conclusion of it, which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I hope the match is good.
yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of know. Like, when I was looking at the card for Forbidden Door, I saw there was a TBD for the last spot, and I was like, okay, obviously that's going to be Jack Perry, and that was before I even knew it was going to be Jack Perry versus Dustin Rhodes. I think they'll still have an awesome match. They could have a way in there if this is Dustin's like last run as a pro. He threw out a little tidbit about he doesn't think that Jack has a chance to beat him fair and square. So they could obviously throw some shenanigans in there to get Jack the win, and then later on bring up that again to have another good match between the two of them, But, I mean, I thought it was a good promo. Like I said, I thought the match really was to build up Dustin for that promo. So then that way we could have a lot of hype behind him going into it. I think it'll be fun. Yeah, I mean, Dustin's a pro. He's been doing a great job for many decades.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that the match next week is going to be good. We go from here. We get a pre-taped vignette promo from Mr. Zack Saber Jr. himself, which I don't think I said this aloud to you, Andrew, but ZSJ is one of my personal favorites in New Japan. I have gotten in trouble for saying it, but he is the modern day Bryan Danielson. He is the next wave of technical wrestlers. I think he is, outside of Danielson, I think he's the best technical wrestler in the world. And anyone can fight me on that. But Zack Saber Jr. says that Forbidden Door season is upon us and the door has been thrown wide open, and he has some unfinished business with Mr. Cassidy. So he challenges Orange to a match at Forbidden Door. And I loved how he ended this. He's like, so Orange, I'll see you at Forbidden Door, darling. I was just like, this is the heel Zack Saber Jr. I love so much. Very cocky, cockney bastard. I love him so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be a good match. Obviously, we've seen their styles or similar styles at least against either of them, so I think it's going to be fun and everything, but it is definitely one of those matches where they were like, hey, let's put a fun match on there with some people that have some name recognition and we'll put them in there. There's not a ton of build up or storyline behind it. But yeah, no, Zack Saber Jr. is phenomenal, and I've seen him show up in places like TNA and previously when he's been in AEW and stuff like that. Like, he's a phenomenal wrestler, so it's always great to see him wrestle. I'd love to be able to get to see him more, but it's fun. It should be a really good match.
I think so too. And funny enough, Forbidden Door is always the one pay-per-view where Orange continues to surprise me, because the first Forbidden Door, I didn't know how him versus Will Ospreay was going to turn out, and that was probably my match of the night, the first Forbidden Door we did 2 years ago. And then the Fatal 4-Way was at the top of my list between him, Daniel Garcia, Zack Sabre Jr., and Katsuyori Shibata in that Fatal 4-Way for the International Championship, which was also fantastic. I wish it went more than 10 minutes, but, that's neither here nor there. So I'm excited to see Zack and Orange go at it one-on-one. It's going to be fantastic. All right, so next we get into a squash match again for a tag team. The Premier Athletes, which are now on AEW for some odd reason, they take on the local talent of Drake Jordy and Dante Leo. This match did not go more than maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Premier Athletes win decisively. This was a squash match. Andrew, if it's okay with you, because this is in conjunction with happens later in the evening, and I want to talk about it now because you get the Premier Athletes to win only for them to look like chumps later in the evening. So are we cool if we talk about what happens later with them? Yeah. Because there's not much, unless you want to give your thoughts about the match, but...
I mean, the best thing about the match was we saw Ring of Honor wrestlers in a squash match that they weren't the ones getting squashed, so that was it. I will say, this ties into the thing later, is I saw them come out and I was like, what the hell, Josh Woods doesn't even get to enter with them? Like, they're a faction and, like, all that stuff. But go ahead and talk about that thing, because then I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense now.
So, later in the evening, because these things go hand in hand, I laughed so hard at this, though. So, Hook and Samoa Joe are backstage with the camera person. And once I heard the Google Translate, I'm like, oh, this is definitely Shibata holding the camera for this one. Because Shibata's thing is that he has Google Translate to do his promo. So I was like, oh, Shibata's behind the camera, which is even better. But Samoa Joe and Hook are walking down this long hallway towards the door where they talk about Joe is shocked that lacrosse is like the longest like sport in the United States, longer than soccer and everything else. And then the best thing part happens where they're at the doors. Joe says, you ready? Hook says, yeah. And then he throws open the doors. It's like, surprise! And then him and Hook, Samoa Joe and Hook jump the Premier Athletes. They throw them out in the locker room. Chairs get thrown around. Mark is about to get thrown until Joe puts him on his knees. He's like, hey, I want you to remember, we did this to you. And then Hook and Samoa Joe proceed to leave. Mark Sterling is crying and is about to pee himself. And then we hear Shibata's Google Translate be like, there's no crying in wrestling. As much as I hate seeing ROH talent get basically thrown across the room, I mean, it's Samoa Joe. Like, come on now. This was ironically my favorite promo of the whole segment of the whole entire night, because this is exactly what I wanted. We're giving Samoa Joe something new to do. It's still within his character of him just decimating everyone. And it gives me the one thing I've been asking for. It got Hook out of the Chris Jericho black hole void. And honestly, I kind of like this pairing of Hook and Joe and Shibata. If Shibata's the third person in this trio, that's a devastating trio right there if I've ever seen one. I like this. This was corny. This was camp. I hate the Premier Athletes got stomped on, but it's Samoa Joe. Like, I'm okay with it because Samoa Joe's still kind of ROH adjacent.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think it made sense that Josh Woods wasn't there, because if nothing else, they would have had more numbers than Joe and Hook. But also, like, if we're being honest, Josh Woods is really the only like threatening one of the premier athletes.
Josh Woods would squish me with one like like arm lock. I was like, no, no, no.
So, like, you know, it would have been more of a challenge for Samoa Joe and Hook to just like jump on him with Josh Woods there. But I do disagree. I don't think they're out of the shadow of the learning tree. I think this is actually building towards a showdown with them again. But I think what they're doing is they're trying to build Samoa Joe and Hook and possibly Shibata as this, like, kind of like the thugs of AEW. Like, and not in a way that they're going out looking for it, but like, they're like, it's kind of that, like, you know, don't mess with us and there won't be a problem, but you disrespect us and we're gonna have a problem.
Yeah, because honestly, this all stemmed from because on Dynamite, the premier athletes started it when they stepped up to Samoa Joe and Hook. And the only reason that nothing went down is because Samoa Joe broke the fourth wall and said, you know, because of all this security, we'll get you later. And sure enough, you know, Samoa Joe don't play. When he says he's going to get you, he's going to get you.
So I think, and like you said, I think adding Shibata to that as a trio definitely makes them like dangerous to anybody. And it does give us some interesting stuff, especially for Hook, who needs more development in that regard. And I think Joe is a good, because Joe's a nice mixture of Hook's dad with a bit better charisma, both in and out of the ring. You know, Taz was good at being the silent, scary guy, but so is Joe. But Joe's also good at talking. Joe's good at character stuff. So I think pairing Hook with him was a smart move. Having them do these kind of things is smart because it kind of puts them in that vein of, you know, kind of similar to like Blackpool Combat Club, but they have a different feel about them. And I think what's going to eventually happen is we're going to see them be the ones to chop down the learning tree, as it were.
Yeah, I hope that Joe and his team ends up winning this whole feud with the learning tree because, you know, I don't want to go into too much of a tangent because we will be here all day. Check out the Dynamite review if you want to hear my full thoughts about the whole thing and how much I died inside, as well as, you know, Bounty Hunter Brian Keith was dying inside every single time we saw him on screen on Wednesday. But we go from here to somebody we haven't seen in a while because, you know, since his friend is no longer with the company, they couldn't figure out what to do with him. But we got a backstage promo, which was a weird promo from Scorpio Sky of all things, where he says, everyone, your friends and heroes have left here, but I'm here for you. And I will be your hero. And together we will, you know, do great things as he awkwardly, creepily stares at the camera. This was a weird promo, Andrew, and it makes me sad because I like Scorpio. I really do. And I'm pretty sure they were going to do something with him and Ethan Page, but because Ethan is no longer with the company, we haven't figured out what to do with Scorpio. And Scorpio is the perfect example and epitome of being lost in the shuffle because he's been cleared to wrestle again for months now. And we saw him pop up in ROH and then he disappeared and now he's back here. This was a weird promo. I like that Scorpio Sky is getting back on my television screen, but this is a weird character choice, and I don't know if I like it quite yet. I want to give it time, but right now, I'm not vibing with it.
Yeah, it was weird. I agree. I think they had some plans, and then whether their failure to follow through with those plans were part of the reason why Ethan Page left, or if the failure to follow through with the plans was because Ethan Page was leaving. This didn't excite me, really. I guess I'll have to see more of where it goes, but I need to see more development than just a promo to be excited about something like this. So I guess we'll see what they're going to do.
We shall see. So we move on from this promo. Now, whereas Chris and Robin Renegade was a bad example of how to utilize talent for a Squatch match, in my opinion, and Andrew can tell me if I'm wrong, and that's okay, this is how we use talent in a more competitive Squatch match. Because essentially this was a Squatch match, but this was more competitive. And we had Lady Frost taking on in a non-title match against Timeless Toni Storm. I actually really like this match for the simple fact that Lady Frost continues to show me things that I have yet to see. I was like, this girl has a bag of tricks. Why are we not pushing her in ROH more? or just in this company in general. But I also really appreciate, because I've said this before on multiple occasions, that Toni Storm is very good of adapting to other wrestlers' style. And I think that comes from her time in Stardom, because Stardom, you have to do that a lot because all the wrestlers either wrestle at a higher speed or hit harder because it's Japanese wrestling. So they gonna punch you in the face. And Toni does an excellent job of adapting her style. I really enjoyed this match. Of course, Timeless Toni Storm does pick up the victory here. But to me, this is how you do a Squatch match and make it more competitive, because this was not as one-sided as the Chris versus Robin match was earlier in the evening.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, at least this wasn't an outright Squatch match. Lady Frost got to show a few things. Again, this is exactly what you were saying. They could have done something like this for Chris Statlander and made her look better in a victory, because most of the time in a Squatch match, it really doesn't it doesn't move the needle for the winner as much as I think the bookers or writers or anything like that think it's going to. It really only does that for like the monster characters, or like the beater kind of characters, the person that's just going to come out and like one punch knock out their opponent, and then we're like, oh wow, like you don't see that happen all the time. But I feel like we've seen Squatch matches so much from the AEW umbrella that it almost just feels like you're like, cool, you just threw that in there to just have another match so you could say you had another match, and we didn't really get anything out of it. I showed up to watch wrestling and you didn't show me wrestling. This, on the other hand, they did a great job. I'm a big fan of Lady Frost. I've followed her before she came into AEW, so I've always been super happy that she has popped up in Ring of Honor and AEW. Still see her on the indies, and she wrestles in Mexico and other places like that too. So it was cool to see that. And Toni Storm is one of those wrestlers, I appreciate it very much, that she makes her opponents look well, and I feel like she's someone who also, going into a match, is gonna fight more for her opponent to get to be able to do things, because she wants to go out and put on a show. While the main event was really good, I feel weird that you're not seeing your world champion in the main event. But this match was fun. It was fun to see Toni Storm in there. You talked about Stardom. I thought it was interesting because when they showed some of the stuff that's been leading up to the match that Toni's going to have with Mina, when she came out and she faced off against the Outcast 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever Saraya and her friends are at right now, it was interesting watching it, because when a lot of the performers face off against Stardom wrestlers, there seems to be something off. They're a little too far away from each other when they go to hit moves. The timing's a little off or something like that. And then when you see people like Toni Storm, Mariah May, some of those folks who have spent time in Stardom, like they all click. They don't have a problem with it at all. And it's funny because those same wrestlers have no problem clicking with the like AEW or non-Stardom wrestlers. So it's interesting to notice that little bit of disconnect. It's like you have to learn how to do the different styles in order to properly wrestle with them. But yeah, this was fun to see. I think like much of the time the women's division are getting the best of some of the buildups. I just wish there was a bit more long-term overall for them, but I do feel like they've done a good job, because I feel like this build-up with Toni Storm's next match has been going through a few of her previous challenges, so it's like she has these nice ongoing stories, even though we don't really get to see her contenders stick around after they face her for the title. They just kind of, it's like, okay, cool, thanks for being here to challenge for the championship, like we'll see you in a couple of years or something.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we pretty much seen this all 2024, because, all right, let's run down everything. So at Revolution, it was Deonna, and Deonna hasn't really returned to the title scene for Toni. In April, we had Dynasty, which was Toni versus Thunder, which led to Deonna and Thunder about to have a no DQ match next week, which I'm really excited about. But like, that's the other, I'm gonna complain about that when we get to the bumper section. I was just like, really, we couldn't have dragged it out to Forbidden Door or to something else. Yeah. Okay, fine, whatever. Anyways, then Double or Nothing, we had Toni versus Serena Deeb, And now Serena lost. She lost on Rampage this week to Mina. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, I want more for Serena. It's like, it makes me sad. And so now Toni versus Mina, I think, is going to be a fantastic match because we know Mina Shirakawa can go. Toni Storm, again, has been one of the few wrestlers on Western television to actually have a pretty lengthy stint in Stardom. She knows how to work with the Stardom girls. We know that Toni's going to win, but I do like the story that we're telling where Mariah May is caught in the middle between Mama Toni Storm and then her friend of Club Venus and the whole entire faction that is of Club Venus in Stardom with Mina Shirakawa. Speaking of Mama Toni Storm, we get this promo after the match where Toni Storm lets Mariah May that, I acknowledge that you're conflicted because you have me and Mina, but I just want you to let you know that regardless of what's going to go down at Forbidden Door, I'm here to support you. And that is why I have decided and I have talked to the people in the back. And Mariah May is also now an official participant in the Women's Owen Hart Tournament. So as of now, it is Mariah May, Willow Nightingale, Chris Statlander. And I was just like, I'm sold just on those three alone. Like, here's the thing. If I had more faith in the story building for AEW, I'll be like, oh, the stories in this tournament is going to be fantastic. It's going to be great. But I'm a little worried because some of the stories are great, but most of them are wah-wah at best. But I am excited for the prospect of the matches we're getting because those three names alone in the tournament, I was just like, I'm sold. We're about to get baller matches. I'm excited to see who else they throw in the tournament. I'm hoping there'll be some surprises. I don't think she's ready, but I will blow my gasket if Jamie Hayter makes a return during this tournament. Like, Andrew will be like, all right, hold up. We may have to guest more often. Look, I'm waiting for Jamie Hayter to return. Like, she is like my favorite. I'm excited. And despite some of the things that, we talk about in terms of recently with attitude and everything, I would also like to see a returning Britt Baker make an appearance in this tournament too, because I feel like it's been way too long overdue to have her come back, but who knows with that situation. But Mariah May is in the tournament, and I called it from the very beginning once we were about to head into Double or Nothing and Forbidden Door. I'm calling it now. I think Mariah wins this thing. It's Mariah versus Toni at Wembley. I would love to see that match. It'd be fantastic. Okay, so we go from a really heartwarming and a promo I actually like to a backstage promo that I absolutely dreaded because we get reminded that next week's episode of Collision is the 1-year anniversary, and I'm just sitting here, I'm like, damn, this show started because we needed to get CM Punk away from other people, and that is the only reason that Collision got created, and we're about to be up on a year on this. This is kind of nuts, but we get a backstage promo off, I guess. Like, words are exchanged between Top Flight and Action Andretti and Shane Taylor Promotions, because next week we're also having another TNT Championship ladder match qualifier with Tiger Style Lee Moriarty and Dante Martin. And I'm just like, as soon as I said Dante Martin ladder match, I just got PTSD. I was just like, no, not again. I was just like, please don't hurt yourself. Like, I cannot relive Supercard of Honor from last year.
No.
But I hated this exchange, Andrew. This was like not great. And I was very surprised because Lee's pretty good. And Dante's okay. But even Lee and Shane, I was just like, this was not great. I was like, it did not make me... I think the match itself is going to be fun, but you did not make me invested in this match next week.
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure we all know that neither of them are winning the ladder match. So, like, nothing against them, but they're winning to see who's going to be a feeder for that match. My response to this afterwards was, sure, I don't care.
I'm just like, again, I'll wait till we get to the bumpers because there's only one match that makes me super excited for next week's Collision 1-year anniversary. So, but we'll talk about it when we get there. We covered the Samoa Joe and Hook, like, jumping the Premier Athletes, which was fun. Okay, this is where I'm going to have a gripe because on paper, this should have been a fun match, but it was another Squatch match. Daniel Garcia versus debuting from Progress Wrestling, Tate Mayfairs. And I just sat there. I was just like, okay, this can be good because I don't watch Progress religiously, but I do keep up in some of my favorite characters. And actually a lot of folks that we see now, especially from the UK scene, come from Progress. Like, obviously we have Will, who wrestled for Progress, and he was their champion before he got signed with AEW permanently. We also have one of my favorite weird wrestling characters of Cara Noir, who is the Black Swan. If you have not had a chance to watch that, y'all need to see it. It is buck wild. We have Nikki Cross's husband, Killian Dane, in progress right now. There are so many good UK talent, and if I remember correctly, too, throwing promotions, Danny Luna was also in progress. We had the Subculture Boys like all of the UK talent you can think of had either got their start or did stints in progress. Progress is a big staple when it comes to UK wrestling. And I got excited because Tate Mayfair's, while on the younger side, is still a staple and a good talent for Progress Wrestling. And I got excited because him and Daniel Garcia's styles of wrestling are fairly similar, obviously with Tate leaning into more of the pugilist, brawlers type of wrestling, which was actually what I was looking forward to. We got like 5 minutes. This was severely disappointing to me. I figured Daniel Garcia was going to win, but I was like, again, you should have made this match more competitive than it was. I'm so mad, Andrew. I'm gonna let you talk for a little bit because I'm gonna ramble on.
No, I mean, it was. This was basically just another Squatch match. I feel like Daniel Garcia is another person who is mismanaged or misused, especially because there's a lack of divisions and a lack of storytelling. It's frustrating to see all this potential running around and no direction for where it should go. And especially because when you add together AEW and Ring of Honor, there's like 24 titles. Daniel Garcia is a former Pure champion. If we actually had a Pure division, he'd be phenomenal back in that. We've seen him wrestle in tags with people. He'd be good in that. Hell, if you're going to build up the storyline with Samoa Joe, Hook, and Shibata and actually have like them be this kind of like beat squad running around, throw Daniel Garcia in there. He's worked with Shibata recently a few times. I'm sorry. I know people enjoy his whole dancing shtick and all that kind of thing, but for most people, comedic wrestling stuff it's not sustainable, especially if you want to get to a certain level. There's some people who can do it for a long time or can do it for their whole careers, but it kind of feels like, internet fame for some people where it's like, oh yeah, you're really hot for like a few months and then we just move on to the next thing. I feel like it's time to switch up Garcia into someone who's actually, kind of like he was going to be hinted at when he first came into AEW. And I think part of it is I just do not enjoy Daddy Magic and his whole thing. I will say he is more entertaining when he's on commentary, but when he's doing promos and in-ring stuff, it's too much. It's annoying for me. So maybe it's them together that bothers me, because I feel like you've got someone who could be a serious good wrestler, and he's got this person who's just always trying to be the class clown. But this match itself, it just made me realize I was watching their fourth show of the week, technically, if you include Ring of Honor in there, where I just was like, okay, so there's another match. Cool.
I think what disappointed me with this week, is talking about this match too, is that Collision has its ups and downs. As much as I love Collision out of the 3 AEW products we get every week as being my favorite, I'm not beyond critiquing it, because that's what we're here to do here at BC WrestlePod. But it's really weird and bizarre to me, and again, I might be biased because I was at the actual taping that aired last week live. But the overall show last week was so much better because it had the people that were involved. And I think that's the other issue that I'm having with all of AEW right now is that there's not a consistency of people who are on there. I mean, outside of your big main champions, everybody else is either in a pre-taped or we don't see them for a little bit. Like, you relegated the trios champions to Rampage, and they're usually mostly on Rampage too. Like, we literally have our trios champions having jobber matches to local talent, and I'm just like, how do you do that to Jay White? Like, I don't understand that still.
And they're trios champions for 2 promotions.
Yes, that part too. And I was just like, Mercedes is, at least she's wrestling next week, but these pre-tape promos, I'm like, yeah, no. I'm like, so I know we're building towards Forbidden Door, but like, we threw other people to the side. Like, we saw Sky Blue, and now she's back into the Netherverse. Like, there's that one. Again, Daniel Garcia has been kind of lost in the shovel. The biggest egregious thing to me is just like, I don't know if he did something to make y'all mad, but where has Ricky Starks been?
Yeah.
Like, where is all that? And I'm just like, there's too much start and stop. And unless you're Swerve, Will, this is how I equate a. And I think it was either you or Professor who said this, but it seems that every time we get a new signee for AEW, it's like the kid who's playing with their new wrestling action figures. I believe it was you who made this analogy before, but they play with the shiny toy for a couple of months, and then the new shiny toy comes in, and we kind of throw everything else into the toy bin, and it kind of just sits there until we remember, oh yeah, we have these figures, let's pull them back out and play with them for a little bit, and then when we're done, we put them back in the box.
Yeah.
AEW's biggest problem is getting these big names or even these big guest spots. Like, I'm sorry, but AEW should have treated Tate a lot better. I know he's not signed with AEW and he's from a UK promotion, but Will Ospreay has said if it wasn't for Progress Wrestling, he doesn't know if he would have had the courage or the skill to get signed to New Japan when he did. Like, he always talks about how Progress got him his official start in wrestling, and he has a very strong presence in the UK wrestling scene, and it's all thanks to Progress. And without Progress, he wouldn't be the wrestler that he is today. So to me, if I was the owner and a booker of a company, I would want to treat my guests who come in to do matches with a little bit more respect. I don't think Toni had any malicious intent when we had this match set up, but he did himself no favors, because if I were a Progress wrestler and I saw how they treated Tate, I was like, maybe I don't want to go and do stuff with AEW until I start to see something. But hey, look at that. TNA's over there, and we know they treat their UK wrestlers pretty well, so let me go work with them. If I were in Tony Khan's shoes, I would really look at how we utilize our roster effectively. And if we're going to bring in guests for special matches, I want their experience to be great. Maybe to sign them later down the road, but also be like, hey, you know, if you just want to do a couple matches here and there, we could talk, we could figure something out. You want to establish good rapport with wrestlers. And I'm not saying that Tony Khan is bad at that, but Tony is doing too much with everything else. We need to delegate some responsibilities here. That's all I'm saying. Long story short, I did not like this match.
Yeah, I mean, AEW's booking is like a hyperactive child who has too many toys to play with.
Yeah. We'll move on, because we could be here all night, and I don't want to, because I don't want to keep you here longer than you need to. But we do get the bumpers for Dynamite, Collision, and Forbidden Door. Dynamite's going to have a couple of matches. Cool. Collision is the 1-year anniversary next week. The only match that I am really excited for, and I hope is given time, and this better get time, because Mama Willow is about to watch this whole thing just because of this match, because she is a new fan. We're getting Deanna versus Thunder Rosa in a no DQ match. Y'all better give these women like 20 whole minutes. I do not care, Collision, because if you don't, I will fight you figuratively and maybe physically. But give these women time. That is the one match I am excited for next week. But I am also excited for the Forbidden Door matches we get. Swerve versus Will Ospreay for the AEW World Championship. Toni Storm versus Mina Shirakawa for the AEW Women's World Championship. And in a title for title match, the TBS champion Mercedes Moné taking on the New Japan Strong Women's Champion Stephanie Vaquer. I'm excited for Mercedes' match next week on Dynamite, because I was like, yes, this is how we do storytelling to Forbidden Door, because Mercedes' opponent is tag team with Stephanie, who is her opponent at Forbidden Door. Also, I'm a sucker for a magician gimmick, so I'm really excited for this match. Obviously, I know Mercedes is going to win, but in a weird way, I trust Mercedes a lot more to wrestle with CMLL girls than other people, but that's neither here nor there. Which finally leads us into the main event after we get a quick promo from Orange Cassidy saying that, you know, all his friends have left him, but he needs to get out of here because he has a match. Our main event is for the first time ever, which is kind of surprising to hear. And I looked up in indies and everything. These two have never crossed paths before, which is kind of wild. But Orange Cassidy versus Kyle O'Reilly with Roderick and the Kingdom at ringside for this match. Can I just say Matt Taven is like my favorite person. He just is the right amount of over the top. It doesn't like detract from anything. Him and Mike Bennett, I was like, I want what they have, because like they're if they're acting, it's really good, but they genuinely seem happy just to be like nonsensical half the time. I love it. But as far as this match goes, Kyle O'Reilly just slapped the piss out of Orange Cassidy a lot. But Orange also did a lot to kind of counteract all the submissions. I was very surprised, and I was like, I shouldn't be. Like, Orange Cassidy and Kyle O'Reilly individually are fantastic, and you put them together. I actually liked this match a lot more than I thought I was going to. And you know what? I was kind of happy that the Kingdom did not get any shenanigans involved with this match. They were just there to root for Kyle, and they didn't get involved in any shape or form. Those multiple dragon screws on the outside to the LED board, I'm like, but I like this match. This was probably my favorite match of the entire episode, outside of maybe Toni and Lady Frost. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I went going into this match, I was prepared to be like, why isn't the women's world, the match with your world champion, one of your world champions, why was that not the main event? Especially when we had the announcement afterwards about Mariah May and the tournament. Watching this match, I was like, okay, I'm kind of okay with this, especially with what this led to, but I thought O'Reilly had some really good counters to and reversals to Orange Cassidy's moves, especially because I feel like Orange Cassidy is another person who needs a change. I know his gimmick is super popular, but I feel like even if it's not changing his overall gimmick, we need something new because AEW has been around for 5 years, and we've seen Orange Cassidy for 5 years in AEW doing this, and he was doing this in the Indies before. So I'm getting to a point where it's like, what's something new that I'm going to see that also makes me believe you're going to move past where you're at? Because he's incredibly skilled. So I would love to see him progress, but he's kind of in a holding pattern. And to that, there's a lot of times that Orange Cassidy does stuff and he kind of falls into the trap of like the Lucha Bros and some of those folks where it's like, all right, like we're playing, where's the bingo card, because we're going to punch off all of the things that Cassidy's going to do in this match. But I liked it in this because, he went for a stun dog millionaire and got caught in an armbar. I think he went for it twice. Once he got caught in an armbar, the other time he just got caught before he ever landed. And he went for a few things that Kyle O'Reilly did a really good job of either like stopping him or countering into his own stuff. And I thought it was really surprisingly good match. I enjoyed it. I do think this was probably the best match of the night, specifically because it was the most competitive. So both people looked really good in this match, and I thought that the setup for the finish was done really well because it made O'Reilly and Cassidy both look strong because they fought till one person could just get enough to win, but both of them were just done by the end of it, and they sold that halfway through the match that they had already beaten the crap out of each other. So I really enjoyed this match. I thought it was a good showing. I hope we get to see some more stuff from O'Reilly. I have some theories about what's going to happen, especially because I don't think the Undisputed Kingdom is long for this world, and I think we might be seeing some big changes, especially once certain people start to actually come back into like active roster. There was a line dropped by Roderick Strong when they were doing the promo earlier. Other than the remember what I told you when you first came here, he also said something about like, yo, you've always been really good. You've always been really good, but there seems to be something missing from this picture, talking about Kyle O'Reilly. And he's like, I can't quite put my finger on it. And there's a part of me that felt like he was talking about the fact that Bobby Fish isn't there, and they've, for most of their careers, were a tag team, and having them, Roderick and Kyle be two, the half of the Undisputed Era. So I think there's a few things that could happen there. And I feel like with Kyle O'Reilly, we're kind of on this upward trajectory of getting to where we're actually going to have him used well, because whether you like his out of ring charisma, his abilities and his storytelling in the ring are phenomenal. He can go with just about anybody that's on the roster. So I hope we get to see something from him in some way, shape, or form.
I hope so too. And I want to be cautiously optimistic because I really liked what happened and what we potentially might be getting down the road. But after the match is over, Kyle leaves the ring. Orange is in the ring by himself. The Don Callis family come in and attack. So Kyle Fletcher and Trent Beretta, they beat up on Orange Cassidy. Kyle is watching this on the Titantron on the ramp, and then I thought they were going to be like, oh, Kyle's going to turn. He's going to go back up the ramp. He's like, nah, we're good. But nope, Kyle comes in to try to save, but Kyle Fletcher and Trent Beretta proved to be a lot for Orange and Kyle, which makes sense because they beat the tar out of each other in the match. And then my other favorite part, Chris Statlander comes in and then punches Orange Cassidy in the face, which I was like, I love this Chris Statlander hero turn. It is great. But then who should come out for the save once again, just like on Dynamite, but Willow Nightingale comes running into the ring. Chris Statlander splatters, and we end Collision with what I'm hoping is a mixed or intergender trios match, because we have Kyle Fletcher, Trent Beretta, and Chris Statlander with Stokely and Dom Callis on the ramp, looking at Kyle O'Reilly, Orange Cassidy, and Willow Nightingale in the ring. And these two factions have a stare down as Collision goes off the air for this week. I really hope we get this match somewhere down the line, because that is gold with all the people you got involved in that one.
You've got Kyle O'Reilly, Orange Cassidy, and Willow as the ex-friends.
Yes, the ex-best friends. They all have been betrayed.
Yeah, they all have been left by their friends, so, they're friends by default. Yeah, it seemed like that was definitely something they're going to set up, especially to have as like, okay, let's do this for now while we move on with some of the other things. I will say, while AEW has this tendency of, especially in the women's division, but overall with their champions, is like, okay, you faced our champion, now you're going to go away and not do much, or you lost the title, now you're going to go away and not do much. They set themselves up well with Willow and Chris, because you're able to take Willow away from the TBS title, but still keep her relevant by having her feud with Chris, as opposed to having her like lose the title and now go off into the void. As where like in actual athletic competition, if you lose the championship, you're still there. You're going to try and get back to fighting for the championship, whether we're talking about team sports or combat sports or whatever. Like if you're in combat sports and you lose the championship, you don't drop down to last place. You're like the second or third top ranked person still. So you should still be within striking distance of the title. So it makes sense now, because she has to deal with this other thing, which now seems like it's giving her a great transition to be able to, both of them, to move over to the world title picture. So, I think this could be a really fun match, seeing Kyle, Orange, and Willow against Chris, the other Kyle, and Trent. It will be a great match. They all have really fun styles to watch in the ring. I would love if we could just get a trios match where it's everybody against everybody, because I think Chris and Willow can absolutely go with any of the four men in that match.
I want Willow versus Brody King. Book it, Tony Khan. Yeah. I want to see who has the battle of the cannonballs.
Yeah, Willow for sure can go against, she could stand up to Trent and Kyle, and Chris can definitely stand up to Orange and the other Kyle. So, I think it could be a fun match, and they did a setup here, and it was actually what happened after the main event that increased my interest, because it didn't feel like, oh, this match was a whole setup to get to this thing, because the match had high quality and time. But what happened afterwards continued on so many other storylines, and it kept me interested. And it was a good look from Kyle O'Reilly to come back and try to help him. There was a part of me that I almost wanted to see, like, catch a glimpse of, like, him getting beat up in the ring by Kyle Fletcher, and maybe have him like look over to Undisputed Kingdom, or at least Roderick Strong, like kind of think about asking for help or something like that, because his supposed friend is sitting right there with backup that could hop right over that guardrail and help, but he wanted to do it all on his own. So I think they could have done a little bit storytelling there too, but what we got was great.
Well, Andrew, this brings us to the end of this week's Collision, so let's go ahead and get the empanada ratings. Despite this not being my favorite Collision episode, I do think there were parts of it that I still liked, but there were also parts of it that kind of dragged it down a little bit. And even though I'm about to give this the score, this does not mean I think this was absolutely horrible, because I have seen worse this week. Dynamite was a 4 out of 10 for me, and that is the worst score I have given this week. I'm going to give this episode of Collision a solid 6.5 out of 10 empanadas. I don't think it was a really bad show. Obviously, last week was just booked better, and there's some bias there because I was there at the actual taping. But I think from start to finish, last week's Collision was definitely better paced. This one had its clunky moments, but there were some things that I really enjoyed. The main event was fantastic. Tease of this, trios intergender match. I want it to happen. The Samoa Joe, Hook, and Shibata being a team thing is actually like really promising. I like that. But as far as the actual matches go, outside of Lady Frost and Toni Storm, and then our main event, everything else was just serviceable squash matches, and it was okay at best. But yeah, 6.5 out of 10 empanadas. Andrew, what say you on this week's Collision?
Funny enough, I gave it 6.5 as well. I wanted to give this an 8, especially looking at the lineup before actually watching it. But there were a few too many squatches, misused performers, and not enough compelling storytelling in it. As a guest reviewer who mostly tries to catch the highlights from AEW, when I do come in and I watch AEW, I see that they have great performers. They have some really good quality production setups, but every time I watch it, there's just not much that makes me feel like I need to tune in each week to watch it, especially 3 times a week. So I pop in every once in a while and watch a full card, and I'm just never enticed to come back and watch it again. At most, I'm like, ooh, hey, that pay-per-view looks kind of fun. I will also say it bittered me a bit because there's nothing I love more than not using the women's division in Ring of Honor that they've built up over a year, than watching those same women not be used on Ring of Honor and instead just be fodder on it drives me up a wall. Like, we just talked about it in our Ring of Honor review where we had this great buildup of women's wrestlers in Ring of Honor, and it's like, where have they gone? Oh, they're over here just getting squashed in so that definitely frustrated me a lot. And I will say, as a side note, AEW is clearly trying to compete with WWE for picture-in-picture time, because holy crap, every match had picture-in-picture. I'm pretty sure a couple of them had picture-in-picture twice. At least the main event did. And on top of that, they went to picture-in-picture for half the commercial break, and then went to a full commercial break without any picture-in-picture. So I was just like, what are you doing? Like, way to kill the momentum. So all of that together just really brought it down for me. And it's a bummer because, like I said, AEW they've got gold, but they're just not spending it right.
Well, Andrew, regardless of it all, I do appreciate you popping in for this week. I definitely, being fully transparent, definitely needed the help for sure. But, despite it not being a really great show, I never have a bad time when we get together to review wrestling, because you offer an insight that I don't. And I like the conversations that me and you get to have with this. We got a busy week ahead of us, so we're going to get up on out of here. But once again, I like to give thanks to Andrew for tagging in for Adolfo this week. Next week's Collision, Adolfo will be back, so El Jefe and El Buntador II will be reunited for Collision next week. So hopefully, and yeah, the 1 year anniversary show, please let the Deanna and Thunder match be as good as I want it to be. Like, that is the only match I really care about. And if that's good, it's going to get like major points for me, but we shall see. But from all of us here at the BC WrestlePod, remember, take care of yourself, love one another, stay Bi-Conic, and more importantly than anything, you always deserve to finish your story. We will catch you for another review down the line, but until then, sayonara and adios.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another Vibe Tribe production. What's gonna happen next time? Well, you're gonna have to tune in to find out. But until then, remember, take care of yourself, love one another, and as always, make sure that you keep the good times rolling. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.